Oh, we got a broken one on our hands today. What do you say, hat on or hat off? Which one makes my Corsair look more stylish on the new Dehkia costume? Yep, I retagged Corsair for the good old days. So, let's get this review started. This is where the spot is. It's in the desert, in the normal crescent area. If you're not aware yet, the 3 pillars where you can put down the Dehkia lantern. This spot is very contested, at least for this release week. The first week, it's been a nightmare to keep swapping servers to find a rotation empty and to pray that it stays empty for a full hour. Nobody comes to duel for spot me or PK me. Carl, I'm looking at you. For requirements, PA says you need 310 AP, 400 DP. I agree with the DP, the spot can be quite dangerous, especially if you grind this on nighttime, but AP wise just get over 1000 total AP, because that's the AP cap, the soft cap at least, 70%, and the monsters are demi-human. So if you can afford it, if you get over the 1000 AP cap, go demi-human artifacts, and if you're running elixir rotation, demi-human elixirs, it's kinda basic stuff at this point. For mechanics, the spot doesn't really stand out much compared to other Dehkia spots. It is slightly different, just like the other ones, but fairly standard. You have waves and waves of monsters that spawn every about 10 seconds each. In terms of actual mechanics, there are only 2. You have this statue over here, which spawns every couple of waves. I didn't actually track it because I didn't really care much for it. It is fairly irrelevant, you can ignore it. What it essentially does is if you hit it a couple of times, it will explode and make the nearby monsters around it have a DP debuff. It will debuff them very slightly. It's very imperceptible, that's why I say it's kind of irrelevant, and if you ignore it, it will explode on its own after a couple of time and buff the monsters instead, giving them slightly more DP, making them a little bit tankier, but again it's very imperceptible. Maybe this mechanic is more relevant and more noticeable for people who don't have the AP to grind here in the first place, in which case why are you here? I can tell you that because I spent many hours, a couple of hours, whatever, on Heilang, which barely touches that 1000 AP cap, and even on him this statue didn't feel like it did anything. It is a release week, so there were no further patches past how the spot came out, so maybe there's a chance this statue is actually bugged. The other mechanic is the big crescent mini-boss, the dude, the tall one, the tanky one. He spawns again every couple of waves, didn't exactly track it, but you will notice when he spawns. He does a couple of purple AoEs as part of his mechanics that you should kind of watch out for. They do go through frontal guard and super armors, so it's a bit annoying to tank it if you play a normal class. As soon as the boss spawns, I would recommend you to just focus him as much as you can, because you have to bring him down to 50% HP. When he reaches 50% or lower HP, he's gonna do a hey come here motion and it will spawn or start spawning the squishy waves of monsters. Why do you have to focus him? Because normal waves will stop spawning until he spawns the squishier ones. So boss appears with its own wave of minions. If you kill the minions without bringing the boss down to 50% HP, like in this case in the background, then nothing will spawn until the boss reaches 50% HP. So try to get that done as soon as possible. Once he starts spawning the squishy waves, you have 10 waves of squishy monsters that die much faster than normal monsters. And that's about it. For safe grinding, make sure you have maxed out knockdown resistance, cause that's the only CC the monsters here do, unless you don't really wanna spare the 15 AP, in which case you do you. Now for the interesting part, the numbers. From what I've heard, from what I've seen, I was told 36,000 trash per hour on level 2 loot scroll, yellow plus Agris seems to be the hard cap here due to the 10 seconds delay on the waves. You cannot grind any faster than that, from what I heard. Again, presumably 35,000 trash per hour is what geared people, good grinders, people like guardians with big AoEs seem to pull, and I assume for most of you, you should aim for 33,000-34,000 trash within that range. For me it was a bit slower. This is my current gear, what I had for most of my hours. I say most because for the first 2 or 3 hours I didn't have this Debos ring. I had another pen crescent, so one less bracket, slightly less AP. I'm almost at 1000 AP with demi-human, artifacts, journals, those crystals, essentially full AP crystals. Honestly here I don't think there's much of a difference between just running Frenzy and Courage, just maxing out your AP and simple Cron, or running an elixir rotation. I tried both just because Heilang, as you know, doesn't have add-ons, he doesn't have a Z buff, and he doesn't have a self AP buff. So pretty much the results you see in this video should be the bare minimum that anyone should pull here. So let's start with the simple results, the Garmoth entries I made. The first couple of hours were a bit slower than you would normally expect and you should get, because I play BDO very inconsistently nowadays, so it took me a little bit to get back into the game, into grinding, to readjust. 27, 26, 28,000 trash, then it jumped up 30.6, this one was 50 minutes, 59, back to Heilang for the last 2 hours, just grinding mounted on Heilang, 30.8, and this one is on Blue Loot Scroll, which gets converted to about 32. This was by far my best hour, so I can pull around 30 to 32,000 trash. Over my 8 hours I averaged 1.9 billion silver per hour. I didn't change this from blue to yellow plus Agris, so it can all be consistent, but this is more detailed on the Excel side. Garmoth is just scratching the surface. At first I thought I am insanely lucky in the first couple of hours, because I'm like 2 rings, 1, and again 2. Dropping 6 Dehkia rings in 4 hours seemed insanely good, but from what I've heard from most people, 1 or 2 Dehkia rings per hour seems to be normal here, so that's why this spot is actually broken. On the Excel side, we can finally delve a little bit deeper into the Crescents iceberg. Starting with the fact that obviously this is the same as the Garmoth data, same things, these were supposed to be untaxed items and taxed items. I didn't track the Layla's petals and the very few irrelevant items that drop here. I valued the rings at max price, because at least at the moment they seem to have recovered. There was a big drop in value close to its release date, because people were just dropping a lot of them, so I expected the price to further crash, just to go down and down and down over time, but for some reason it just recovered, at least on EU. With all of my hours normalized in terms of trash per hour, this was the 50-minute session, this was the 59 one, so just trash per hour converted all of them, even the blue plus Agris into yellow plus Agris converted. Agris used for every single hour, the best one again 20,000 Agris, the last one 19 on average, let's say, for the other decent hours. And the baseline money per hour, which honestly don't look at these, it doesn't matter, it accounts for, obviously my first couple of hours were slow. I averaged 17.3 or 29,000 trash per hour on yellow plus Agris, which again, it's not exactly great. You should get 31, 32, 33, 34. So let's just say this is the official money per hour. Blue, yellow plus Agris, yellow plus Agris. I started with 31 because we can play with this number. Let's say 33,000 trash per hour. This is how it looks like if you pull that much. 34,000 trash per hour. That's how it changes. And 35,000 trash per hour, maybe even 36,000 trash per hour, because again, from what I heard, this is the hard cap. But let's just say 33 sounds about right, normal. 2.3 billion silver per hour on yellow plus Agris, 2.1 billion on blue plus Agris, and by the way, this is raw profit, without extracting the money spent on the lantern, which Garmoth does, without accounting for your consumables, your elixirs, your food buffs, your the tent buff, for example, the drop rate buff, the church buffs, maybe take out the 160. Let's say this is only 2 billion after the expenses. For the loot scroll scaling, in case you're interested why this number looks like this, if you want to convert blue into yellow, for example, it's about 40.8%. I initially tried to do this the old way, where monsters here drop 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 trash, essentially on yellow and Agris. You see constantly, if you look at the chat, 3, 7, 10, 14, 17 trash, so it seemed like it was supposed to be 3.35, not 3.5, the yellow plus Agris scaling, but this is actually not true, because bigger monsters drop more trash, and it's obviously TLDR. I looked at trash per Agris, trash per monster, two different metrics to see how loot scroll is supposed to scale correctly. Both resulted in 13% increase. Yellow and Agris session gave me 13% more than the blue and Agris session, so it results in this number. Now I would like to move into Agris and Agris efficiency, but I forgot to change these numbers because I did enhance my Debo rings at some point to try to get a tri-Debo, to try to get my second Debo ring, and in the end, out of 9 rings, I did get one. I have currently 1 duo and 2 base rings, so I wanted to show you at least how these numbers change if you decide to enhance some of your Debo rings to try to get more profit out of bonking some rings. You do make more profit, but at least with my success rate, the numbers barely change, like 100-ish, yeah, about 100 more million silver, which could easily be said, oh, you didn't value the fail stacks used, so did I really make any profit? Not really. The Agris story here is pretty interesting. From what you've probably already got a sneak peek out of this here, I used the last hour for the efficiency hour test, whatever, the 20,000 Agris burned session. For this, for those of you who are new around here, speed doesn't matter. The way I calculate this efficiency is money made per all of your Agris burned, just 100,000, and it's only Agris excluding the loot scrolls and everything else. So this is independent to your actual grinding speed. It doesn't matter. Looking at how this spot compares to the couple of other areas I got to test since redoing the Agris charts, where is it? Am I that blind? It's supposed to, this one, it's the first one. How did I miss it? I don't know. Basically, this kind of sets a new standard for what an Agris efficient spot could be. I used to think Israhit Highlands is unbeatable. This is what, 20-25% more efficient than Highlands in terms of just Agris efficiency alone. On the other side of the Agris story, you have the Agris coin. Remember the big project I just made? Yep, it's time to add a new spot to it. This one, Crescents, is about here. Let's say the 4th, very, very close, obviously. This one it does matter how fast you grind here, because the Agris coin, as all of you know, it's a 1 hour buff, just like a loot scroll. So in this case, unlike the Agris points, it does matter how fast you grind. Here I used 35,000 trash per hour, yellow plus Agris, just that speed, very close to hard cap, to try to represent the spot in as good of a state as possible. Next up on our conversation, we are back to Polyforest, because experience and skill points. Once again, to remind people, every time there's a new event, just like this one, the current one with 200% skill points, those buffs, for whatever reason, experience is additive, skill points don't seem to be additive, all of the skill point buffs. So I'm back to Poly to retest it. But let's just say it wasn't worth it. It was to make sure the number is as accurate as possible, but TLDR, experience here is decent, nothing to write home about. Just use scrolls if you want to. Skill points, really bad, it doesn't matter. It's not even in the topic of discussion, right? And most of you don't care about skill points, so it's whatever. Next up is the question of should you use blue or yellow loot scroll, what I used to call the loot scroll efficiency calculator, the place where I input my actual yellow loot scroll hours. You don't look at these numbers, it doesn't really matter, because it imports the average 17.3, the slow trash per hour before scaling it up, and the money per hour I made, converts it into blue. I used that 40.8 scaling, not this wonky one, as I said earlier. That's why I tried to go through it. The point is, it's about 54%. If you get 100% value out of a blue loot scroll, yellow uses 2 loot scrolls at once, but you only get half of the second loot scroll as value. In my opinion, if you don't care about getting as much money as humanly possible and you want to conserve some loot scrolls, I would use blue, but it's up to you. And lastly, this is something I would like to poke more with in the future. If you're too lazy to move to your horse to drop your trash, how many maids would you need to sustain your 35,000 trash per hour speed? Because I definitely used my maids, just only my maids, to move trash. I never dropped anything on my horse. Assuming you will use each maid 3 times per hour, I will try to get more in depth with that in the future, but for now let's assume each of your maids will be used 3 times per hour with 35,000 trash. This trash weight, your total load, you would need 105 maids if you cannot reuse them, but if you use them 3 times per hour, then you need 35 maids. So let's say I would recommend you to have about 35 maids in total if you plan to ditch your horse and not bother breaking his back. So what do you think about the spot? Finally, PA made something I can be proud of. It's the most Agris efficient spot I've seen to this date. The Agris coin efficiency is also amazing. Experience is the only lackluster part, but we don't really, at least I personally nowadays, I don't care much about it. Skill points might as well be dead, doesn't matter. And then the money per hour, it's the easiest spot. I can do it mounted on Heilang. I can still do that. I can still play the thing that, again, let me remind you, Heilang has 100 less AP than a normal class. I should not have the damage to grind here. It's still working, and I make 2 billion per hour. Like, I just sit there, chill, and I print 2 billion per. I've never seen 2 billion per hour in my life in this game. I know some of you high-end players can get that consistently. For me, 1.5, 1.6 was insane money. Now I make 2 billion. What did I come back to? Regardless, if you enjoyed this video, a like would be massively appreciated, or leave a comment to share your opinions, your thoughts. Engagement always helps, and it makes me feel good about myself that I put so many, like literally so many hours just to gather all of the data. So yeah, I will see you next time with a different spot. Until then, stay happy, keep grinding, and bye bye.